Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going to be looking into something a little unexpected. The power of empathy in design.
Mm,
Now you might be thinking, hold on, isn't design all about data and, aesthetics? But we're going to uncover why empathy is the secret weapon behind truly successful innovations.
right, yeah.
All thanks to insights from The Empathy Imperative: Understanding People Deeply.
Oh, great book.
It sounds a little dry, I know.
Yeah.
But stick with us. We're going to uncover some really surprising insights and I think some practical takeaways too. So to kick things off, what exactly is empathy in the context of design? I mean, we're not just talking about, feeling sorry for somebody, are we?
Not exactly, no. It's about going deeper than that. There are actually three levels of empathy to think about: cognitive, emotional, and compassionate.
Okay.
So let's imagine for a second you're designing a medication reminder app, right? For, let's say, seniors. On that cognitive level, you'd understand that, okay, they need help remembering to take their meds. Emotionally, you might recognize that anxiety they might feel about missing a dose.
Okay, so I'm already seeing those layers. Where does compassionate empathy fit in then?
Well, that's where you move beyond just understanding and you start looking for those solutions.
Right.
So you might think, how can I design this app so that it's reassuring, it's empowering, not just functional? Can I add features that help alleviate that anxiety? Maybe like clear instructions, large fonts, or even a way for, family members to be involved.
Wow, that's a totally different approach than just, focusing on the list of features.
Yeah.
So how can we make sure that we are tapping into this deeper level of empathy when we're designing something new?
Well, it starts by becoming a bit of a design detective, right?
Right?
You got to pay attention to what users are saying, what they're doing. Think Sherlock Holmes, right?
Uh-huh.
Observing every single clue and using active listening to unearth those hidden anxieties and needs.
Okay, so how does that look in practice? Are we literally watching people use a product?
Well, that's definitely part of it, but active listening is crucial too. Imagine you're watching someone struggle with a website. Instead of assuming you know why they're having trouble, you got to ask open-ended questions like, what are you hoping to do here? What's making this difficult for you?
Right.
Their answers might surprise you.
Yeah, I can see how that open-minded kind of questioning could lead to, insights that you might not have expected.
Absolutely. And never be afraid to challenge your own assumptions. Sometimes the things we take for granted are the biggest barriers to a good user experience.
Right.
Like, you might think a feature is intuitive, but your observations and user feedback might reveal that there's a hidden complexity there that you hadn't considered.
It's funny. The source material we've been looking at mentions this really interesting case study about Airbnb. It talks about how the founders personally visited the hosts, and they even took professional photos of their apartments, which, led to a huge surge in bookings. Now, wasn't that just about making the listings look better?
Well, yeah, aesthetics played a part, but I think the real genius was in their ability to understand the anxieties on both sides, right?
Right.
The host wants to showcase their home in the best possible light,
Of course.
but they also need reassurance that their property is going to be respected. And the guest wants to feel confident that the photos, they accurately represent the space.
So Airbnb addressed those anxieties not just through the photos themselves, but by creating a platform that built trust and transparency.
Exactly. They saw that opportunity to turn a simple photo shoot into a way to build empathy and forge stronger connections.
Wow.
And it had a huge impact on their success.
That is a great example of how empathy leads to these practical solutions that really make a difference. But, let's be realistic.
Mhm.
Is it possible to be empathetic all the time? I mean, it can be emotionally draining, especially if you're dealing with, complex or sensitive user needs.
Yeah, that's actually one of the biggest challenges when it comes to practicing empathy. It's something called empathy fatigue.
Empathy fatigue.
Imagine you're a therapist constantly absorbing their clients' emotional burdens, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's important to recognize those signs of fatigue and take those steps to recharge your own emotional batteries.
So how do you combat that empathy fatigue? Is it just setting boundaries or taking breaks?
Those are definitely important strategies. It's also about having a support system, colleagues you can debrief with, share the emotional load. Being an empathetic designer doesn't mean sacrificing your own well-being.
It's amazing we've gone from talking about comfortable chairs to, the emotional well-being of designers.
Yeah.
But it really highlights how important empathy is
Yeah.
to, the whole design process.
It really is. Speaking of that process, you mentioned some benefits of empathy earlier. Can we maybe dig into those a bit more?
Yeah, you mentioned that empathy can actually lead to better product market fit and can even impact a company's, bottom line. I'm curious to hear more about that.
Okay, well, think of it this way. When you really truly understand your users' needs and frustrations, you're much more likely to create solutions that resonate with them on a personal level.
Hmm.
And that means products and services people genuinely want and find value in.
So instead of chasing, the latest trends or just guessing what people might like, we're using empathy to actually create products that are, practically guaranteed to succeed.
Exactly. And when people feel understood and like their needs are being met, they become loyal customers.
Right.
And they're more likely to recommend your product to others, which, just boosts your market reach even further.
It's amazing how a concept like empathy can have this real tangible impact on a company's success. But, beyond the business benefits, you also said that empathy-driven design can lead to more inclusive solutions. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Oh, absolutely. When you come at design with empathy, you're just naturally more in tune with the diverse needs of all those different user groups. So, for example, if you're designing a website, you'll think about things like accessibility features for people with disabilities.
Right.
Or if you're developing a mobile app, you might think about language localization, cultural sensitivities for a global audience.
So empathy kind of expands our design perspective
Hmm.
and lets us create products that are truly, inclusive and accessible.
Exactly. It's about moving away from that one-size-fits-all approach and recognizing that, everybody has unique needs, unique experiences. Now, our source material mentions this interesting idea of false empathy.
Yeah, I was wondering about that.
Can you maybe explain what that is and why it's so important to, watch out for it?
Yeah, it does seem a little bit contradictory.
Yeah, it's like this false empathy happens when we, project our own feelings and assumptions onto others, and we assume that they experience the world in the same way that we do.
Right.
It's a trap. It can be a real trap for designers, especially if they haven't done, enough user research.
So how do we avoid falling into that trap? How can we be sure we're practicing genuine empathy and not just pushing our own perspectives onto the design?
Well, it goes back to those design detective skills we were talking about.
Okay.
You got to be a keen observer, ask open-ended questions, and constantly check your own biases, Remember, the goal is to understand the user's perspective, not to just validate our own assumptions.
So it's about this constant process of self-reflection and critical thinking to, really practice empathy.
Exactly. It's an ongoing journey, but it's worth it. Now, shifting gears a little bit, I'd love to hear more about what you think the future holds for empathy. Our source material hinted at some pretty exciting possibilities with AI coming up.
Yeah, I was really intrigued by this idea that technology, which is often, blamed for making us less connected, could actually help us become more empathetic. How is that even possible?
Well, imagine AI-powered tools that can analyze huge amounts of data, things like facial expressions, voice tones, even physiological responses. And they use this to give us insights into human emotions.
Oh, wow.
These tools could help us to see subtle cues that we as humans might miss. It could lead to even deeper understanding of user needs and behaviors.
That sounds almost like, science fiction. But wouldn't it be weird to rely on algorithms to tell us how someone's feeling?
It's important to remember that tech should be used to augment our own empathy. It shouldn't replace it. It's like having a really powerful microscope,
Oh.
It helps you see things in much greater detail. But the human element, that ability to connect and interpret those findings, that's still crucial.
So it's about finding that right balance. We're using technology to enhance our understanding, not, tell us how to feel.
Exactly. And speaking of the future, there's also, exciting potential in virtual reality. Imagine being able to experience the world through the eyes of someone from a completely different culture or background, or even, someone with a disability.
Yeah.
I mean, the possibilities for fostering empathy and understanding are huge.
It sounds like, these advancements could totally revolutionize how we connect with each other and how we, navigate this increasingly complex world. But like with any powerful technology, we got to be mindful of the ethical considerations, right?
Absolutely. As we kind of, explore this intersection of technology and empathy, we need to be asking those tough questions.
Right.
How do we ensure privacy and, protect sensitive data? How do we avoid creating algorithms that might reinforce those existing biases? Those are just some of the challenges we need to think about to make sure that these technologies are used ethically and responsibly.
It's a good reminder that even as we explore the amazing potential of AI and VR, we need to, ground ourselves in those core principles of human connection and empathy. It's not just about what technology can do, it's about what it should do.
Couldn't agree more. And that's actually a perfect lead-in to, our final thoughts on the power of empathy and how we can all kind of cultivate it in our own lives. But before we do that, let's just take a second to kind of reflect on what we've talked about today. It's been quite a journey.
Welcome back to the deep dive.
Yeah.
We've been talking all about, the power of empathy in design.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm curious, how can we take what we've learned and apply it to our daily lives? Even if we're not, designing websites or apps, how can we use empathy to, make our interactions better and have a positive impact?
You're absolutely right. Empathy isn't just for designers. It's something we can all develop. It really starts with those, small conscious steps we talked about.
Okay, so where do we even begin? Earlier, you were talking about active listening being so important.
Yeah.
How can we, be better listeners in our everyday lives?
Well, it's really about, shifting your mindset from waiting to speak to truly focusing on what the other person's saying. Resist that urge to jump in with solutions or interrupt with your own experiences.
I catch myself, already thinking of my response while someone's still talking.
Right.
Not exactly the best listening.
I think we've all been there. But try this. Next time you're having a conversation with someone, just imagine you're like a detective, right? Gathering clues. Pay attention not just to the words, but, the tone of voice, body language, facial expressions. You'll be surprised at how much you pick up on when you really tune in.
That's a great way to think about it. I also remember you mentioning, the power of just asking why.
Right.
How can that one simple question help us be more empathetic?
Asking why, it shows genuine curiosity, and it just opens up the door for deeper understanding. Instead of judging someone's actions or opinions, try to understand, the motivations behind them. You might be surprised to find their perspective makes a lot more sense than you originally thought.
So it's not about judging, it's about, understanding where they're coming from.
Exactly. And speaking of challenges, remember that being open to different perspectives is key.
Yeah.
Your way of seeing the world isn't the only way. And, embracing that diversity of thought can be so enriching.
It's like, expanding your mental map.
Exactly.
Including new landscapes and points of view.
Yeah, I love that. And finally, don't underestimate the power of vulnerability. Letting yourself, be open, be authentic, that just creates a space for real connection and understanding.
That's like Brene Brown says, right? Vulnerability is like the birthplace of connection.
Yes.
I know it's not always easy to, let your guard down.
Right.
But the rewards can be incredible.
I completely agree. By being vulnerable, we not only deepen our own empathy, but we kind of give other people permission to do the same. And that just creates a more compassionate, more supportive environment for everyone.
This whole deep dive has really highlighted, how empathy can have this ripple effect. It's not just about, these one-on-one interactions. It can influence, our communities and even society as a whole.
It's true. Think about all the challenges we're facing, globally. Climate change, social injustice, political polarization. What if we, approach these problems with a whole lot more empathy?
Right. Imagine if we tried to understand those perspectives of people who are, on the other side of an issue. Find common ground, find solutions that work for everyone.
It's a powerful idea, and it really does start with each of us, By just being a little more empathetic in our own lives, we're contributing to a more understanding, more compassionate world.
This deep dive has been incredible. I feel like we've gone from, understanding the different types of empathy to exploring, how it's going to play out in the future. And now I feel like I've got all these tools to actually make a positive difference.
Yeah. And remember, empathy is kind of like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. So keep practicing, active listening, keep asking why, be genuinely curious, and just embrace all those different perspectives that make the world so interesting.
You've been listening to The Deep Dive. We hope you've enjoyed this exploration of empathy as much as we have. Until next time, keep learning, keep connecting, and keep those empathy muscles flexed.